This is part of my introduction to the university, but beyond, schools, about what is theology, what is religious studies. In fact, let's take the word theology, which is coming from a Greek word, theos, and another Greek word, logos. These two words, the word logos is word, the study of, theos, the study of God, quite literally. So the fathers of the church, patristics, would say that the study of theology is actually prayer. If you want to be a proper theologian, you should really be aiming to be a saint. Of course, theology is also an academic discipline, but does this mean, even if we take that patristic idea that theology is about sanctity, is about the religious life in practice, what is that? Does that mean that we spend our entire time in a theology lesson on our knees? No, it doesn't actually. It doesn't even mean we're not even halfway there with that thought. Because if we go back to the traditions in Judaism and in Christianity, we just go back to the biblical traditions. How do we follow God? Following God is summed up very clearly by the idea of kindness, loving kindness to the stranger, charity. You've got it in the story of Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. Abraham responds with kindness, and that is the measure of his devotion to God. Kindness, nothing to do with lots of prayer. It's to do with his activity in the world, and also with the Good Samaritan. When the Good Samaritan asks, when the young man asks Jesus, "How do I do this?" Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan, which is about being kind to the stranger, in Hebrew chesed, loving kindness. So that's the least we can expect. And what I would see in terms of theology is an ability to understand, or at least comprehend, to apprehend, to appreciate the religious traditions that somebody else, that the stranger, has got. These religious traditions may not be ours, but we should appreciate these, admire these, come to understand these as much as we possibly can. That is loving kindness in action as far as I can understand it. And that's certainly how I intend to progress in these talks. Now, I'm going to play a few minutes of a talk that I did in the Moscow State Pedagogic University, MPGU, and is an introduction to the course in theology, in which I go through some of these ideas. But wonder, we come back again to that American word, awesome. I think this second description adequately describes all forms of learning. We trust and we explore together in the confidence of sharing a tradition. I started by mentioning Wittgenstein, and I want to recall that quotation again. Everything that can be said clearly. This seems to me to be paralleled by two quotations from the New Testament, taken separately. They're quotes that tend to get nodded through, but put together they form an interesting challenge. The first quote is, "Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect," perfectly reasonable there. And the second one is, "No one is perfect but God alone," a complete contradiction. The Greek fathers of the church certainly dealt with this. Our vocation, they said, is to be perfect, but we are inevitably going to fail. There's then the perfect antinomy. So again, with Wittgenstein, our aim is to be clear, but we must recognize that in all likelihood we are going to present a muddy thesis. I think it's important when you're looking at theology that you don't switch off your other instincts or your other subjects. I certainly think theology is enriched and enriches our understanding of literature in general. There's a story, actually I told the story in the lecture, I'll just play that. We need freedom, we need space, but not to the point of danger. We need freedom, we need space, but we also need kindness. We need freedom, but we need to be tested. Experience needs to be tested. As a base rule, I have found doubt to be a great friend and certainty to be something I measure against the traditions I've inherited or to which I subscribe. Certainty is something I treat with great respect and awe. Certainty can be dangerous. Father George Florovsky sums it up rather well. He says, one cannot separate spirituality and theology. Theology can never be separated from the life of prayer and from the exercise of virtue. I like that because it sneaks in a third point, that prayer in itself is pointless without the practice of kindness. We can think here of the story from Dostoevsky in the Brothers Karamazov of the woman and the onion, which I'm sure you all know. She had died, if you remember, and she found herself in hell. And this is rather unexpected. She thought she'd lived rather a good life, and she remonstrated with Satan. I shouldn't be here, she said. Well, said Satan, is there any kindness that you have ever done? And she thought, probably for eons. And suddenly she remembered that she had given an onion to a passing beggar. At that moment, the hand of God descended, and there in the hand of God was the selfsame onion for the woman to grasp. She did so, and she started to rise out of the fiery pit. And just then she felt other sinners grabbing onto her legs, grabbing onto her feet, and struggling to be pulled out of the fiery pit as well. In fact, I think Dostoevsky describes them all holding on to her toe. But she held fast, she gripped that onion. And then she looked down, and she was halfway between heaven and hell. She was practically at the gate of heaven, and she realized that a long chain of grubby sinners was holding on to her. And in her anxiety to maintain her grip on the onion, she kicked the hangers on. Get off me, she said. It's my onion, she squealed at them. And that moment the onion snapped, and they all fell back to hell. A demonstration of a supreme lack of kindness, a supreme lack of understanding. Theology is always about kindness. Actually, I can be broader. Education in general is about kindness. One of the things which worries me so much about streaming is that if you are doing well, how wonderful is somebody else is doing well too. It doesn't make you any better to ensure that your neighbor does worse. So that's our subject, and I look forward to seeing you at future classes. Thank you.